I'm going to read a notice to begin. Due to efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, the council chambers of Town Hall will not be open to the public to attend council meetings until further notice. Members of the public who have an interest in a matter listed on the agenda may, up until 10 a.m. on the scheduled council meeting, email councilagenda@orangeville.ca indicating your request to speak to a matter listed on the agenda. A phone number and conference ID code will be provided to you so you may join the virtual meeting and provide your comments to council. Members of the public wishing to raise a question during the public question period of the council meeting may, beginning at 8 p.m. on the evening of the council meeting, call 1-289-801-5774, conference ID 908-256-65#. Correspondence and emails submitted will be considered as public information and entered into the public record. If you require access to information in an alternate format, please contact the Clerk's Division by phone at 519-941-0440, extension 2256, or via email at clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca. May I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Close. All in favor?
Yes.
Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest? None. We'll now move to the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, David Nair, Artistic Director of Theatre Orangeville. We would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. This meeting is being aired on public television and/or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Moving on to item 10, we have a motion to approve these minutes, but we are going to look to amend. 10.3, we've had a request to look at item 12.3 on that. So let's pull it up here. This was the motion to have the consultant come back, and there was a request for councillors to identify those in opposition. So under item 12.3, those in opposition were McIntosh, Sherwood, and Brown. So we'd like to amend the minutes to that. Are there any other amendments, councillors, on any of those minutes?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, it's the February 8th minutes.
I'm sorry, February the 8th,
yeah.
Item 10.3. Okay, any other amendments, councillors? Could I have a motion to approve that with that amendment? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, second by Councillor Sherwood, all in favor? Thank you. All right, tonight we have some presentations. Number 11.1 is a group from the Orangeville Girls Hockey Association, Michelle White, Don Williamson, Linda Vaughn, and James Herr. Folks, are you on board? And is there somebody going to speak to this matter?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Michelle?
Yeah, hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Nice to see you, Michelle.
Got my camera to work this time. It's nice to see you as well. I would just like to request, I know last time we were here, we also had Orangeville Minor Hockey, Rick Stevens with us, and Skate Canada. I'm just wondering if it would be okay for them to join us as well at this time?
Sure.
Perfect. And I've brought with me today James Herr, he's our Director of House League, and Don Williamson is our ice scheduler. And I'll actually be passing it over to Don because he is the one that meets regularly with the town. So I'm going to pass it over to Don to speak on our behalf.
Okay. Welcome, Don. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me. If it's okay, I just made some notes. I'm just going to sort of read from the paper so I can hopefully capture everything I want to say. Again, thank you for providing this opportunity to speak before council. My name is Don Williamson. I've been involved with the Orangeville Tigers Hockey Association for approximately 19 years, and I've been in the ice schedule for about 14 now. The OGHA recognizes that all towns, organizations, and people are experiencing the effects of COVID-19 at varying levels, that our ask of a fee reduction is not a small request. I'd like to take just a few minutes to express why our ask is in the best interest of many here in Orangeville. The OGHA, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about us. The OGHA operates a sliding scale for our registration fees. We do this to encourage and enable as many families as we can to try and experience hockey. Our fundamentals program, that's our U7s, is a program which is $125 for the entire season. Our under 8s are $250. Our U11s are $400, and our U15s are about $500 for the early bird registration. During a typical year, the OGHA also participates in the Bauer First Shift program, which for $199 provides new players aged 6 to 10 with all new equipment and 6 weeks of programming at 1 hour per week. We keep a supply of goalie equipment, which we provide to our goalies, both rep and house league. We offer a 50% rate for our goalies as well. Throughout the year, a normal year, we offer skill sessions at cost and host at least 2 very well-attended tournaments, which provide a lot for the economy of Orangeville. These tournaments subsidize our sliding registration fee. During these tournaments, we schedule skill showcases, which is considered one of the highlights of our tournaments. We also promote the Canadian Tire Jumpstart program, which helps players get involved and cover some registration fees when it can't be afforded to. We make our members aware of local equipment sales and swaps. We make sure that there is value for our Tiger families. We try to make hockey accessible for all girls who want to play, but we as an organization can only do so much. We are a non-profit organization that depends on fees, sponsorships, and tournaments to provide our opportunities for the girls. The overwhelming majority of costs of hockey participation is the ice fees, which are controlled by the town. This brings me to our request. We want to be able to offer ice time for the physical and mental health of our town's youth. We are seeing a devastating effects of the pandemic on everyone's mental health. It is a pandemic all on its own. In a typical year, the high cost of ice is offset by our various fundraising activities, which I have mentioned. Having a maximum number of girls on the ice, with the COVID protocols, the number allowed on the ice is drastically reduced. The $186 per hour that is current, divided by 10 players now allowed, is obviously much higher than what we have anticipated with our fees. Prior to the lockdown, the town was offering public skating over the Christmas break with COVID protocols in place. So for $3, which is drastically lower than that of $18.60 that would be needed to cover the cost, the town recognized that the community members could not be expected to pay higher costs now associated with the once economical activity of skating. We understand that the town must look at the whole picture, which includes finances. The town is obviously suffering too, due to the hockey and skating not using the ice, which has been kept in, and they are paying to keep it in. The cost of ice maintenance is high, especially considering that we have older and less efficient compressors and other equipment that the town is still using. During our meeting with town staff last week to discuss our return to play, we worked out that in order to have equitability with only having 10 players on the ice at one time, we would need a minimum of 34 hours per week to keep all of our girls on the ice once per week. It was also requested that 3 ice pads be kept. Now, the original contract was that 3 ice pads be kept until the end of March. We requested that it be extended by a couple weeks to the weekend after Easter, and that then 2 pads would be kept in well into May to complete our seasons. We understand that the dry floor users will be coming in May, so we understand that we can't keep all 3 pads in. The staff report is recommending that an ice pad be removed, and no date is provided in that report. It is also recommending that the non-prime rate be billed as opposed to half the prime rate that we are requesting. With this recommendation, we are uncertain as how we will be able to accommodate our program if only 2 pads of ice are left in immediately. The staff produced report, while thorough, has missed a scenario. They did not include the scenario of hockey and skating not continuing with any ice rentals. There are no tables to show the loss of revenue and the still present expense of the ice maintenance to date. If there is no reduction of fees and hockey and skating are not able to continue, will the town leave any ice in to provide for subsidized public skating or programs? What will the effect of the kids who are not able to have that mental and physical outlet that they so desperately need? What will the lasting effects on hockey and skating be in Orangeville? We are not asking for a handout, we are not asking for a grant, and we are certainly not asking for taxpayer money to be used for us. We are just asking for some help with the fees that are the main costs of sport, which we have no control over. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Michelle, did you have anything further to add, or?
I think Don captured everything in there that we're experiencing as an organization.
Okay. Councillors, any questions you wish to ask this group before we move on to our next group? Seeing none. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and
thank you.
We're going to be speaking to the staff reports later on this evening. So we'd like to invite Louise Johnson from Skate Canada. Louise, are you available?
Hi there.
Hi, Louise.
I didn't really put much of a presentation together. Don covered a lot of what we're looking for. We are a little bit different than hockey, as we have not taken registrations throughout the season. We took 5-week intervals. So at this point, we have no money and no registrations. And we will not be able to run our can skate programs with the cost of the ice it is right now. We will try to do our star skate, which is our figure skating programs. But they already had an increase this year. So our can skate programs basically cover and help cover the cost of our star skate programs, because we're normally allowed 40 or 50 on the ice, but this year we were only allowed 20 on the ice, 20 to 25. And so they didn't subsidize our star skaters at all. So our star skate fees went up 121% for our older ones, and the younger ones it went up by 82%. And we just want to be able to offer at least our star skaters some skating, again for the mental health reasons and just to get some exercise. We would love to be able to do our can skate program, but with limited ice, there's no way we can do it with only having 10 kids on the ice. So basically and we don't have fundraising like we usually do. We usually do a few big fundraisers, and we haven't been able to do that as well.
Okay. Thank you, Louise. Councillors, any questions for Louise before we move on? Okay, thank you, Louise. I see Rick Stevens is with us as well. Rick, Terry Shepherd. Rick, you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my meeting or my report won't be quite as long as and in depth as Don's, but I would just like to start by saying thank you for letting us present tonight, and it means a lot to the members of minor hockey. So I want to dive into, I'm not sure if you guys have been aware, but the town of Halton on November 23rd of 2020, through their 2021 hockey season, winter season, offered their minor sport groups a 50% reduction of facility contract rates. The report goes into why the town is offering these rates to the minor sports group and the extent, listing the costs provided with this initiative. So the basic conclusion to this was the impact of COVID-19 has affected the ability of minor ice and floor user groups to financially support the hourly rate of town facilities for their return to sport based on the ice and floor user groups' capacity to respond and adhere to provincial guidelines and the town's desire to support the continued viability of sport groups through community rebuilding efforts. Staff recommends the town reduce the regular ice and floor rental rate by 50%. Assuming the restrictions lighten over the next year, rental fees would return to full rate as per the town's usual rate. In there, Burlington reduced their fees by 50%, Oakville by 25%, Milton by 50%. They're in our group of hockey related users in our area. So I just wanted to let you know that they did that and it was their initiative. The sports groups didn't come to them. The town provided that to the sports groups. So I understand there's some other stuff coming down the hill today. So basically, if we were to run an 8-week program starting on the weekend and running through to April 18th, using 2 pads, possibly 3, but probably likely 2 after tonight's meeting. The cost would be as follows. So if we were to use 70 hours over 8 weeks, it would be 560 hours, and I'm only talking Orangeville minor hockey, not the other 2 minor sports groups. So the revenue at full rate would be 118,000, a little over 118,440. At 50%, it would be 59,220, and there's also a non-primetime rate, which I know the staff could explain what that is, but that's I'm sure Mr. Brennan could certainly enlighten everybody on that. But it would be 71,120. I know just before Christmas, the town staff offered that out to the residents when Orangeville minor hockey said, no, we better take a break because we're moving into the red zone. I mean, at the very least, if we can't get 50%, I'm certainly requesting that we get the non-primetime rate. It would certainly pay the bills. There was a report, in that report that Mr. Osmond sent out to you guys in earlier in January. The report stated that it cost $25,000 to operate the arena. And if you added the minor sports group rate for summer to pay the staff and the building lights and stuff, it's $60 is what they get. So even if you added those 2 together, you're still not quite at that non-primetime rate. So it's somewhere just between the 50% that we've asked for or the non-primetime rate. So somewhere in there, we're certainly not asking the town to lose to have our kids come out on the ice for the next 8 weeks, but we're just asking for a small reduction.
Rick, what's your normal registration number, and what do you expect to get if you do have a shortened season?
So right now we're at 675. Normally we're anywhere from 950 to 1,050. So we are down 30% from last year, just right off the start. So we're down that money. We obviously, I mean, in our report we first gave you back in January, we didn't have the tournaments we normally do for revenue. We couldn't go ask businesses to sponsor our teams, you know, because everybody's, you know, certainly behind the 8 ball this year. So.
Okay, and would a lot of that reduction though be because of rep hockey not being played this year?
I mean, it's not rep hockey. It's all hockey. I mean, our house league have certainly, you know, their hours have gone down. Our minor development league has you know, in all areas of our hockey, the registration's gone down, just due to the pandemic, I presume, and the lack of only being able to put 10 kids on the ice. So.
Great. What did you do with jerseys?
We didn't buy any new jerseys this year.
Very good. Councillors, any questions? Yes, Councillor Peters, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I was kind of waiting for all 3 groups to finish and pose the same question to all 3, and that is at the non-prime rate, so the 116 an hour. I think we heard from Mr. Stevens, but I guess if I could have all 3 groups comment on whether they would hold, you know, let's call it an 8 to 10 week season at that rate, or is that rate a no-go for any of the organizations here?
We'd be fine to do that at the non-prime rate. We'd be okay to do a season, and if we had the ice, we might be able to do some can skate as well. It depends on if we can get the ice for that.
Michelle or Dawn?
I know for Orangeville girls hockey, we would certainly have to discuss it as a board. I believe that we would be able to still continue. I don't know for how long. Dawn, do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, at the non-prime rate, I believe that we can complete the 8-week program. We would have to discuss, like we'd have to look, it really depends on when we can go to, if we're going to be into the orange, where we can get more players on the ice too, depending on what that's going to look like. And again, I'm going to repeat again about the ice pads. We would need the 3 ice pads in until the 8 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever it is that we discussed. And then we could scale back and get our program done in time.
Okay, thank you.
Rick, did you comment, Rick Stevens? As well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm the one who probably just proposed that, but I certainly, you know, I'm not Orangeville Minor Hockey. I would have to take it back. I've already called an emergency meeting for tomorrow for our board once we hear from you guys. So we would certainly get back to you as soon as possible.
Okay, Councillor Andrews, you had your hand up, sir.
I did. Thank you, Your Worship, and I'd like to again thank the 3 groups for being here this evening. Your points are well taken amongst all the members of council. I noticed that there was a point of reference from Mr. Williamson regarding the possibility of utilizing 3 ice pads until about Easter time. And this would be opposed to, I guess, Mr. Osmond. What would be the impact of that if, from a sequential point of view, would that be a doable scenario, looking at 3 ice pads till, say, Easter, and then reducing it down to 2 ice pads? Because in a previous council meeting, we were looking at, you know, the different scenarios that had been presented in the report.
Mr. Osmond.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Councillor Andrews. Well, I guess the unfortunate thing with all this is that the ground is moving underneath us every day, so things are changing in terms of the ice pads we have available. Right now we have 1 dry pad and we had 3 ice pads. We have, I'm not sure how Mr. Brennan would like to move on it, but we have another request in today we're dealing with, which would take another ice pad out of the system, and we'd be down to 2 pads. And we'll be down to 2 pads as early as the first week in March. And, you know, the fact is that when I put the report together, we tried to find a compromise, and the compromise was that we would work with 2 ice pads, and we would look at prime time, non-prime time rate, and try to push the program by trying to do 2 dry sides and 2 dry surfaces and 2 ice surfaces. I think from a business perspective, the attempt was to try to maintain some level of revenue generation while we try to accommodate all users. I can tell you, effective today, We have 4 or 5 dry floor users that are asking for time as soon as possible in March, which normally would be late March for dry pads. And as all the groups have alluded to, usually by the end of March, we're off of out of the ice and we're down to 1 pad being green rink. And we're looking at here, as they put on the table tonight, if we push the season for 2 pads into April, we can maintain the ice side for 2 ice pads, and we would have 2 dry pads to do other things with. And that's where we're at right now. Unfortunately, we're not going to be in a position to have 3 ice pads because we have demand on the dry pad, and we also have demand on the red pad in Alder that we're dealing with as we speak. So I guess what we're trying to look at here is whether or not we can go with a non-prime rate over a 8 to 10 week period, and those scenarios are put on the table. And they would still generate revenue, and we would still accommodate both the ice users and the dry users. That's one scenario that we put on as one of the options. And the other option was that we didn't get into was if we would continue with our 2 ice pads at the regular rate, and that would change things completely for the groups who have before you tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Osmond. I have one more question, Your Worship.
Go ahead, sir.
Great, thank you. This would be to Mr. Stevens, and I know that this is a fluid piece regarding, the ebbs and flows of COVID and, the movement into the current red zone, and I hope that we end up moving into orange and subsequent other colors that allow us to do much more of what we used to do. But typically in your schedule, you look at rep hockey tryouts, and that would be typically held, if I do recall, April and May. Would this be something that would be pushed back to the fall?
Yeah. So through you, Your Worship, our tryouts have already been pushed by Hockey Canada into September. I've let Mr. Osmond and his staff know that already, so they're well aware of all the process for that. I can't speak on behalf of girls, what their protocols are, but we're mandated. We're done until September. So we've asked for 1 pad in early August just to get our kids back on the ice, depending on how things go with the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Your Worship.
Right. So we've been talking around a bit tonight. Mr. Brennan, do you want to just share with the audience what the request has been for a red rink?
Yes, Your Worship. Town staff has been working with staff from the County of Dufferin and Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health Unit. We met last Friday afternoon and met again this morning and conducted a tour of the Alder Street Rec Center. As you know, our public health units are looking at vaccination sites, and a number of communities and municipalities throughout Ontario has been retrofitting arenas and ice surface, or pads, as Mr. Osmond refers to them as, for mass vaccination sites. So management of public health unit was in today. They have designated or asked that our arena be used as a mass vaccination site for Orangeville and Dufferin County and potentially other surrounding areas. They would ask that would be ready to support and be in place for the middle of March, which would mean that our staff and county staff would work with our public health unit in getting the arena ready. I think Mr. Osmond alluded that the ice would probably have to come out starting the end of next week in Red Rink at Alder Street. That has been identified as the main location, best fit for their program of vaccination, accessibility, space, and everything else. So I would put to council, considering the pandemic that we're in and the priority of vaccination to our residents and the community at large, that my recommendation would be we strongly support our public health unit in the vaccination efforts of our residents, and work with our user groups if council deem necessary to facilitate the ice use for their groups as well, with two ice rinks, so 2 pads.
Mr. Osmond, if I could ask a question. You mentioned that some of your dry pad users are putting pressure on or asking for space now. Is it possible to push their seasons back to accommodate our ice users? I know that the dry pad users, I don't think they go into the late summer. They're usually done sooner. So would they accommodate our ice users or be amenable to accommodating pushing their seasons back?
Your worship, what our early indications are is that they would, their needs to be satisfied at one pad at this point, right into April. So if we go right to the dates that were put on the table tonight, we go into April, the new March break, if you would, after March, after Easter, April 16, 18, that kind of a date. Then we would work from that point at this stage and try to get 10 weeks in, 8 to 10 weeks, and that will be our first run at this. And the other indication would be that once we get past April, if we still had demand for ice, we would try to go with one pad, i.e. green rink, and we would run Tony Rolls at all dry services. That will satisfy the demand, because then some of the dry users we have now would actually go outside, and then we would continue on with lacrosse and some ball hockey into that season. So basically we're trying to accommodate both sides here, and we'll continue to do that, and I think we will get those groups to work with us.
Okay. Councillors, any questions anybody wishes to ask? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, I see your hand up, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. This is to Mr. Osmond. Are there other groups that have prime time fees, i.e. the pool, soccer? Do they pay a prime time fee like hockey does?
Your Worship, through to Deputy Mayor, yes, we have prime and non-prime rates, but the prime rate difference in a arena is much larger than a rate in a pool. We have the competitive swim rate is at a little lower level than prime, but everywhere else it's just one fee right across the board for all the services.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Taylor, did you have your hand up?
I did. I've been in the queue for a little while, Your Worship.
I'm sorry, Councillor Sherwood. I don't see you here, and I apologize. So if you could verbalize and let me know. But let's go with, if you don't mind, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Sherwood first, and then yourself. Go ahead, Councillor Sherwood. My apologies.
So are we in full out discussion right now, or are we waiting till the report time? Because I thought this was just to ask a question to the delegate at this point. Or are we putting forward?
We seem to have slipped right into full-on discussion.
But I thought at this point, the point of order would be that we would be just asking a question to the delegate and then talking about the report when we get to it. Yeah. Can I get clarification, please?
Fair enough, Councillor Sherwood. I think we probably should be, at this point, if there's no further questions.
I have a question for one of the delegates, if I could.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead,
but I do have a question in regard to the report that I'd rather wait till the report time. Mr. Stevens, a survey was submitted by Ms. Doherty to answer some questions specifically related to, different things that would help with our decision tonight. And I don't see a response back from you. Do you have one on behalf of Orangeville Minor Hockey?
We gave most of those answers to the questions on the very first meeting, and I advised Ms. Doherty of that.
There were several questions on the. It seemed as follow-up questions from council's direction at that meeting.
Okay, I was unaware that those were council requests.
Mr. Osmond, can you clarify, were these not put out after our council discussion to the delegates?
That's correct. We did put some questions out by Ms. Doherty after the meeting to put together some detail for council, and we asked people to respond, asked the three groups to respond, and Mr. Stevens is correct. He chose to respond verbally in the meeting and not in writing.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll save my other questions for when we discuss it at the.
Okay, the report. Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to our guests, I'm just curious, as I understand it, you know, the kids want to play games, right? But we can't play games. We're going to have diminished amount of kids on the ice and we're going to practice. Is that correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
May I ask a follow-up, Your Worship?
Sure.
Have you, to the delegates, have you asked your participants if that is desirable to them? I'm just curious what people would be saying about practice versus games, and is that something that's going to entice people to come back, or will we get full participation? What's the thoughts of the groups?
Mr. Williamson, I see your hand up, and then Mr. Stevens. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, based on the Orangeville girls hockey, when we were going into red, prior to going into red before Christmas, we had asked our membership if they would continue or if anybody wanted to opt out. We did have an opportunity for members to opt out, and everybody came back overwhelmingly saying they wanted to continue. They wanted to continue in the red. They wanted to continue and hope the season gets back. We can play a few more games before the ice all comes out. I'll let Rick speak to Orangeville minor hockey. And Your Worship, if I could, before you kick us off to discuss the report, if I could make a request based on 2 pads. But I'll let Rick speak right now.
You want to make your comment now, Mr. Williamson, and then I'll ask Mr. Stevens?
Yes, thank you. So I was not aware that the county was asking for the red floor to be used as a vaccination center. I totally agree with Mr. Brennan that that is a high priority rather than, you know, 3 pads of ice for minor hockey. But going down to 2 pads, we will be under some tight constraints because that'll put us, you know, under our bare minimum to run the kids through once a week. I would request then that I know the dry pad users want to get in, but they have no idea what their seasons look like. They are also going to have to social distance just like us, and who knows when they'll get up and running to full on lacrosse games or all the ball hockey and all the other stuff that goes in on the dry floor. I would request if we are going to have 2 pads that we extend that till the end of April, maybe even the first weekend in May, so we can get everything done. And then I know through our meeting last week, Orangeville Minor Hockey through the OTF has you know, permission to continue till the end of May. I'm not sure if girls would continue to the end of May, but I do know that 2 pads of ice would definitely help us to try to get our program done by that first or Mother's Day in May at the latest. So that's my only request if we're going to go to 2 pads.
All right, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Taylor, I just wanted to first to Ms. Sherwood. I truly apologize. I was not aware that it was questions from council, or I certainly would have put them on paper and put them back to you. So I apologize to you for that. And Mr. Taylor, we asked our directors if there was certain age groups that maybe didn't want to come back, and I am aware that the older midget, we'll call them house league, like recreation players, I believe they're not returning through the director. So that's one of the groups. I don't know exactly how they've asked their coaches and members, but we did ask the directors of each age group to reach out and inquire. So, and that's kind of where we're going tomorrow's emergency executive meeting. Is I'll know exactly who's returning and who's not, I hope.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Mr. Osmond, I just want to ask regarding the dry floor users, like the lacrosse users, I presume the rep lacrosse has been canceled. Is that correct?
Your Worship, at this point, you're correct. Right now, we're looking at minor groups, and the groups have made the same comment. There's no sport right now in this country that or anywhere that are actually trying to have a program that works. We're trying to juggle and pivot, if you would, and make things work. And right now we're in red zone, so red goes to orange. It changed a little bit, but at the end of the day, we're all working with the same situation here. And one of the reasons why I think we can juggle the dry side with the ice side is that for that particular reason is that you're going to be lower numbers, and we're trying to spread it out over a longer period of time.
That's what I was getting at, to push back the dry floor users and let the ice users have a longer season because of the 2 pad versus 3. Louise, go ahead. I see your hand up. Go ahead. You're muted, Louise. Sorry.
I just wanted to mention we're not light hockey, so we don't play games. We are an individual sport, and we do have the opportunity to still have a test day for our skaters, which we had to miss out on in December, not because of not being allowed to do it in the red, but we had to have a specific evaluator from our public health unit. So we do have that opportunity to offer test days to our skaters as well, which would be great if they could get at least one in for this year.
All right, so per Councillor Sherwood's discussion, we really should thank our delegates at this moment and then move into the staff report and discuss and make a decision at this point. Councillor, one more request. Any further questions of delegates at this moment? Oh, Councillor Sherwood, go ahead.
Are we able to have the delegates stay online in case we do come and have a question for them when we get to the report part?
I think that would be a good idea. Delegates, are you going to hang on? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's move along then to 12.1, and this was a staff report that has been put together with a number of options. Kind of with the will of council here at this moment. We had a couple of scenarios put out there, 50% reduction and also the non-prime rate. The difference being 116.73 per hour versus 93.38 per hour. And that's really, I think, where we're at. I think the discussion we had this evening was around pushing out the season to allow for ice users to put in 8 to 10 weeks, notwithstanding the fact we've lost a pad, it looks like, as of today. So, councillors, any further comments? Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. Before we make a decision, I don't think we can, like, for example, if we choose to go with the non-prime rate, I think that needs to be across the board to all sports organizations. I don't see how we can just pick one and say that, you know, we're going to give you a discount. I think every other group that has prime time rates, they should be lowered too. So I just wonder if we have any idea what that sort of cost would be overall.
Would that include the other field users like soccer and baseball, Deputy Mayor? Is that what you're thinking?
Absolutely.
Everybody? Okay. All right.
Swimming
do you have any idea of what that cost would be if we went on prime across the board for the next several months?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I didn't. We didn't do the numbers on the across the board with all the outside users and with swimming, so we had to go back and bring that number back to council.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Andrews has his hand up. Go ahead, sir.
I know that Councillor Taylor also had his hand up before I did, so go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
And Sherwood. Taylor, Andrews, and then Sherwood. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Councillor Andrews is the most polite politician I've ever met. I just wanted to make sure that the otters were brought into what Deputy Mayor was saying, and it was, and I appreciate you bringing that forward, Councillor Andrews. I'll defer to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Osmond, and unless I missed it in your response earlier, for the non-ice, so this would be the dry pad, there is a prime time and a non-prime time fee. Is that correct?
There's a regular fee, and all minor groups get a 20% discount. So it's a 20% discount to your minor groups is across the board. So we have a regular rate, we'll say, but they're not as much as prime and non-prime in the dry side. There's a regular rate and there's 20% discount. So
Okay.
that's the difference. That's the difference in the two systems.
So for the sake of Deputy Mayor McIntosh's point, if you know, we were kind of to bundle all of this together under that whatever scenario we all decide upon, or whatever scenario is elected to be decided upon, I guess that could be somehow clarified, Mr. Osmond, so that would be identified as a non-prime time rate for this particular piece.
We would have to do that for you and break it out that way. Yes, we'd have to look at it from a non-prime rate. Would be our non-prime rate in our rate system is based on 50% of the 50% of our regular rate.
Okay.
But in the case of ice, you look at it from a prime time ice versus a non-prime ice, which is a little different in the outside world, if you would.
Yes.
Similar with swimming is a little different because it's a lot lower number, so is applied differently across the board. So that I'd have to break all the numbers out and go through all the numbers and show you how each one would be on the chart, and then you get a good idea about what we're looking into today in terms of. And we also have to take a look at all the revenue or all the hours that are normally rented and give you the same, if you would, the same charts that we gave you for ice.
Now, one other question, Your Worship, to Mr. Osmond, the impact of moving to 2 pads, and as the different user groups have identified that this would require an extension of the season in some capacity, or the training process. How late would we be going, and how early would we be starting?
We will be starting as early as Saturday on ice, and we would, as Mr. Brennan alluded to, our first indication is we would need to start to take ice out by next week. So we get a third pad for another week, and then we would start taking ice out to get ready for. There's a lot of work around getting that pad ready for the vaccination center, so that's going to take us a couple of weeks. So that gets us in our time frame for that area, and then what we would actually do is we would run our ice program. We'll do it at 10 weeks, and then we would actually communicate with all the users, and we'd do a juggling thing. And what will probably happen is we'll revisit things with ice users again and say, okay, what would happen after April? Is there demand to go into a week, 2 weeks in May? Or do we need to continue on to the end of May for 1 pad? And we need to have that discussion along the way. The other thing we don't know, of course, is things could still change. So we're really going day by day here with, we're in red zone right now. That could be orange in the future, which changes things again. To have more people that can go on ice at one time, it would change their hours of demand. And again, that's how we would proceed week by week.
Great, thank you for that explanation, Mr. Osmond.
Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. So I just want to make my my mind very clear here. So, Mr. Osmond, we currently have 3 ice pads right now. We have 1 dry floor right now. There's no intention of putting ice in there, right? Tony Rose has 1 ice and 1 not. Correct?
That's correct.
I think it's very imperative that we free up the red rink to have it available for mass vaccination throughout the community. Even though I'm very sympathetic to hockey wanting 3 ice pads, I'm also very much mindful that we need to get our community vaccinated. So what we're looking at here is having 2 pads, 1 at Alder, 1 at Tony Rose, to potentially go at least to April 16th, but possibly to the end of May. Correct, Mr. Osmond?
That would be correct, yes.
So my question to the 3 participants is, will you still be able to run your programs, give children an opportunity to still participate in your programs with 2 ice pads running until April 16th at the minimum, possible the end of May? Just let's just not worry about the rate right now. I just want to know, will you still be able to offer those programs to each of those 3 participants? Just a yes or no, please.
Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Williamson.
Yes.
And Louise, I forget your last name, Johnson. Ms. Johnson, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Follow up on Councillor Sherwood's question, Mr. Osmond. Total number of hours from these 3 users on a weekly basis. I heard 34, I heard 70. I'm not sure what Ms. Johnson, what are we, 120 hours a week or less?
Your Worship, they would fluctuate depending on the demand, but I think Mr. Stevens alluded to it. They would go from, right now we're looking at we're starting at 915 hours. We're going down to 6 something, and then you would go down to 570, I think was Mr. Stevens said for his. And girls hockey is a little lower than that. And the figure skaters or the can skate would be lower than that. So right now, what happens is the can skate have a spot they use, and everybody kind of works around that, evolves around that. And the other thing we have, the relationship between these 3 parties is that they would actually work at their schedule and juggle their schedule, so it's optimal for all 3 groups. So it changes week to week, but they do have an average that they work with. And minor hockey being the larger, anywhere from we'll say 500 to 600 hours, and then on it goes all the way down the line until we do all the small group figure skating.
Right, but if my guesstimate of 120 a week is relatively accurate, I'm just looking at the price difference between the non-prime and the 50%. And the difference is $23 an hour, 120 hours. So we're like, $2,500 a week, which, in the whole scheme of the running of this town is not a lot of money. So my suggestion would be to go with a 50% reduction right across the board, as Deputy Mayor McIntosh said, to every user group, and maybe until the end of August. And at that point, we reevaluate, because I hope everybody's got the jab in their arm at that time, and we're back to normal in September. Councillor Sherwood.
Mr. Mayor.
Then, Your Worship, then when we need to.
Peters wants to speak as well. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Sherwood. I just want to make sure I got in the queue.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Councillor Peters. So if we were to change to 50%, we would need to change our rates and fees bylaw, because that rate does not exist in our current bylaw.
On a temporary basis, yes. Yeah,
right.
Your Worship, just for clarity, so that I'm clear myself from what Deputy Mayor McIntosh had said. So you talked about non-prime rate. Non-prime rate is 50% of our prime rate, so that'd be $116. The 50% of the minor rate is a different thing. 50% of the minor rate is $93. You're right. There's a difference of $23 between non-prime in the ice world, non-prime, and the 50% request. 50% request is 93. That's the difference. That's the difference in the going from non-prime down to the 50%. My understanding from Deputy Mayor, you need to clarify for me. My understanding from Deputy Mayor is that if the non-prime is 50% of the regular rate, and the 50% regular rate will be across the board, and we go back and factor the 50% on our regular rate down. 50% would be based on the non-prime scenario, not 50% on the minor rate. Is that correct?
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, absolutely. I was referring to the prime, not 50% prime, because if we go 50%, we need to give 50% to all users, and that's not financially viable. So I was referring to the prime rate that I would support.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Councillor Peters and then Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just sort of summarize my thoughts here. So I know there's some confusion over what is 50% or not, but it's my understanding that the 116 an hour is the 50% of the prime, which sounds like that's what the Deputy Mayor is talking about as well. So, and I also agree that we need to address all the sports. Given that we have this much information about the ice sports, I think we should make this decision tonight, and some of the dry floor / summer sports can be addressed as we get more information. Some of their seasons may be more or less compromised than the ice users have been, but I would be supporting what's written in the report as option 1, which was rental scenario 4 at the 116. It sounds like the groups could get a season in. And then regarding timeline, I understand that keeping it flexible is positive for the users of the ice. What it does though is it doesn't allow the dry users to necessarily plan out their season. So I'd really like to see us decide what that date is tonight, and just everybody can plan accordingly. And if that's end of April, maybe that's 12 weeks, however it works out. It'd be nice for everybody to be able to plan for what that date is, get their schedules in, make the registration costs line up, and then not compromise the dry and summer users too much either, right? Try and thread the needle between both seasons so that we're not, eating into other people's time. I'd like to balance it. And I think it's in everyone's interest to know what that date is if we can agree on that tonight.
Right. Okay. Councillor Sherwood, you have your hand up.
Councillor Peters, was that an actual motion you were putting forward? Because I was going to second that.
It certainly can be.
What, if we can just focus on the date here, Mr. Osmond, what do you feel is the date? You mentioned maybe tipping into the first week in May, or do you want to? What are your thoughts?
Your worship, 10 weeks would take us to the end of April. And then we would revisit after the 10 weeks where we're to with our dry side and not so much being flexible, Councillor Peters, but working with these groups that we would look at whether we go with 1 pad or 2 pads. And if we had the demand on the dry side, we would have to go with 1 pad and juggle it to the later part of May if possible, and see how that works for us. In this world we're in here, guys, it's not uncommon for us to do that right now. The unknown, and there is unknowns, unfortunately, the unknown is we don't know what's going to happen with the dry side no more than we do with the ice side. The dry side might find themselves, with less numbers, trying to juggle the same scenarios. I know right now, as an example, lacrosse couldn't go on the floor at all last season because we couldn't have no contact. In the lacrosse world, contact is needed. It's the way the game is played. Hockey can, do skill development, pass the puck, and these kinds of things. Not the same in lacrosse. It's a very contact sport. So they're all a little different. And we also have a situation where some of our users right now are asking for, which we normally would do, they would ask for dry time, later in April. Like soccer and ball hockey as an example, even baseball. Baseball have come to us and they're going to use the space as well. And again, as revenue generation, we want it, but then it would go outside, which would mean we'll have vacancy on the inside. So we're trying to work, we need the flexibility to work with those groups. If we go to the end of April, that'd be our first 10-week period. These groups can work around that 10 weeks, and then we would revisit it to get into the May month and decide what happens in May month. I think that would be the best for us operationally, and from our perspective, if we could work with our groups that way, and we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, so I think we were at the point here of maybe a motion. Mr. Brennan's got his hand up before we get back to Mr. Peters. Go ahead, Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, just a couple of things, and I'm to help council make the decision, but I'm sure that the user groups, the 3 ICE user groups that are making the ask tonight, will certainly work with Mr. Osmond and staff to maximize the hours of rentals and the office hours that are available. I know over the years on weekends, it seemed to be a later start at some of our ICE facilities because the teams had the luxuries of selecting better hours. So I would ask that the groups, if council approves this tonight, the groups work with our staff to maximize the hours that are available on 2 pads. And the other thing I just want for clarity, I think Mr. Stevens has asked at our last council meeting was, while we're in red zone, is the intent still that you will go back to a regular price if we go to orange or a less restrictive zone in our lockdown? I think it's just to clarify that for staff and for council before they make a decision.
Mr. Stevens.
Sorry. So you want me to answer that? Sorry.
What's the expectation as we go forward into a more relaxed situation?
Well, I believe, on behalf of Orange Minor Hockey, our ask was, we asked for 50%. Obviously, it sounds like we have a better way to get at least the non-prime time. Our timeline was, we're only going to go till the end of April, and at the very most, our program was probably going to be 8 weeks. 10 would take us to the end of April. I don't know if we can, do that. 8 weeks is no problem with the money that we have left. If we get the non-prime rate, past that, I can't promise. That would be something I'll have to discuss with Mr. Osmond. And obviously, I certainly agree with Mr. Peters. If we hit the ice in August, we're back to full rate. I certainly don't want to. End of April is when our request stops.
Right. So I think, Mr. Brand, if we're going to agree to this tonight, we should tell them that regardless of where we are in April, in terms of zone, that we're committed to the lower rate till the end of April. I would hope that's what council's wishes. Councillor Peters and then Councillor Sherwood. Go ahead, Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will officially put the motion on the floor then for option 1 at the reduced, what are we calling it here? Non-prime. Non-prime. For the duration of the season, and the ice to be kept, you know, till the end of April. And if and when we revisit the timeline, we can worry about that. But I would put that forth.
I'll second that. But I wanted to add something, Your Worship. Are we also including all the sports youth programs? And if that's the case, we should be extending that into the end of their season, which would likely take us till the end of August or beginning of August. And my last question, Councillor Peters, is could we also include in your motion that staff be directed to remove the ice in the red rink in order to accommodate vaccination sites?
Mr. Brennan first and then Mr. Peters, Councillor Peters. Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, I would ask that council leave the flexibility with Mr. Osmond and staff and working with the ice user groups and the dry groups at the end of April. If there's a requirement to keep the ice in for 2 more weeks to accommodate our groups, I think that would be wise. And that's operationally how we normally work. And the second part to Councillor Sherwood, I would ask that maybe we speak towards or speak on the vaccination center, maybe in new business, and then council put forward a motion of support for town staff to work with public health and the county to prepare and get ready the ice or the vaccination center. And that way we would have our marching orders and support of council, but maybe at the time of new business, if you don't mind.
Or notice of motion, is that what you're preferring, or?
I would just ask if council will give us a motion tonight, a resolution to support the vaccination center and staff to move forward to assist with the setup of vaccination and the operations of it.
So separate from this report.
Please, just in case council has more questions on the vaccination center, that we don't get it all mixed with this.
So if we can recap what Councillor Peters has said, he was focusing on the user groups that are before us tonight and talking about the ice users specifically, and to request that staff come back at a future date, probably in a couple of weeks from now, with a better idea of what extending that reduction to the balance of Parks and Rec users across the board will be. Is that what your thoughts were, Councillor Peters?
I was going to say the same thing. I think it's worth the same level of discussion for the other sports. And while, you know, I want people to know we're thinking about this, it would help to have more information in front of us. So I would tack on to the option 1 motion, if Councillor Sherwood is amenable to it, that staff come back with a report regarding the reduction of fees for other user groups.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm looking at page 8. Madam Clerk has put in front of me. This is a report CMS 2021-002, and it's scenario 4. And that,
yes, it's called option 1 in the motion, I believe.
Yeah, but it's 2 ice pads at non-prime rate. No, at non-prime, not 50%. Yeah, ice pad. Okay, so in terms of the staff report, right? So 12.1, option 1 is what you're suggesting, Councillor Peters?
Correct, with a report on their user groups, and then I believe Councillor posted their hand up.
Yeah, Councillor Sherwood, you were seconding that?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, any further comment from any councillors before we vote on this? Councillor Taylor, go right ahead, sir.
I think I was behind Councillor Post, Your Worship.
Sorry, Councillor Post.
That's okay.
I don't see in the queue here and I can't see you. I apologize.
No, that's okay. I went in the queue and I waited, but I figured it wasn't working properly. No, I was struggling at first to support this because we weren't looking at other minor sports. because we are now looking at all of our minor sports and making sure that we're being equitable amongst them, I'm definitely much more comfortable supporting this tonight. Mr. Osmond, I do have a question for you, and I know everybody's talking about what happens if we go into orange or into yellow, but on the flip side, I hate to be the downer here, but what happens if we go the other way and we go back into lockdown? I think we have to have a plan in place to remove the ice immediately when we go into a lockdown situation, because we can't afford to be spending the money maintaining the ice if we go back into a lockdown again. I think if we can stay in red and our user groups are able to enjoy the ice and we can get some prime usage out of them, but I think we have to be prepared for the other side. So is that something that you feel that we need to include in the motion as well, or is that something that we can just leave in your very capable hands?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Post. It's actually a good point, and frankly, the operation will not sustain going beyond this if we don't have users on the ice. So if we go into lockdown, then we would remove all the ice and we would make other operational changes in overall in community services.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess for me, you know, I do have, my son is in the hockey league, so we certainly benefit from this, and he's chomping at the bit to come back. The piece for me is, and I think Mr. Stevens said it, but I don't think playing into May is something that hockey should be doing. We also have friends in the lacrosse community. I want to make sure that they get out and start to enjoy that rink as well. So it sounds like we've already come to that agreement that we won't extend into May. So I think that's a good thing. And then I guess Councillor Post always seems to beat me to these things, but I'm conflicted as we do this. You know, candidly, I don't think this is a great idea in terms of offering a discounted rate in any sort of way. However, what's tilted it for me is that this is fair and equitable now. So we have gone across to other user groups, and I know we don't have the details worked out, but you know, if the auditors are watching or other groups are watching that are wondering, we will deal with you and work with you to a fair situation as well that's equitable to the organizations that are here tonight. So I guess in politics, sometimes you do what you think is best, and I'm in alignment with Councillor Peters and Councillor Sherwood as we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any further comments from councillors? All right, so all in favor of that motion?
Yes.
Yes.
And Councillor Post, I can't see you. Oh, there you are, and you're in favor?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll work together. Those groups will start working tomorrow with staff, and Mr. Osmond has been asked to come back to us in the near future with a broader look at discounted rates for the other user groups. So, thank you. All right.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Sorry, it's Rick. May I just say I really want to thank everybody. It's great for the kids, and I just want to apologize again to Ms. Sherwood for not understanding that those questions, and I also want to apologize to Mr. Taylor. Sometimes social media gets the best of me, and I believe it did this week. So I apologize to you, Mr. Taylor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stevens.
Okay, let's move on positively, and we're looking forward to having our user groups back on the ice as soon as possible. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to 12.2, and this is the planning decision regarding Edgewood Valley. This is some exciting news that we've been waiting for. This is going to help us get Hanson Boulevard completed, and of course marrying up with a bridge and open up Northwest Orangeville in the way that it was planned initially. So it's very good news. So this is a recommendation that report INS 2021-011 plan and decision recommendation of Edgewood Valley Phase 2 B2 plan of subdivision RZ 2007-03 and sub 2007-01 be received, and that the draft plan of subdivision included as attachment number 2 to this report be approved, subject to the conditions of draft approval included as attachment number 3 to this report. May I have a motion for that? Councillor Andrews, second by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Are there any questions, councillors? I see Andrews, I see Sherwood, and I see Peters. Mr. Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I'm assuming this would go to Mr. Ward. In reviewing the report, and again, thank you for the detail regarding this particular development. We've had previous information provided. As I ended up scanning through this, I noticed something regarding the, I guess it's pronounced Milady Pond, and breach conditions that have occurred under heavy rainfall events. Could you just explain a little bit about that, and what is the town's view on this, and is there some responsibility of the developer, or would there be some responsibility for the town on ensuring that there was no additional issues with that particular pond?
Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Andrews. So the breach conditions, I believe, are sort of more historic activities that have been observed with the Milady Pond. And just for clarity, that's an existing facility that's situated just to on the west side of Amelia Street, somewhat south of Hanson Boulevard. These lands more broadly sort of filter down or feed into that facility. It was, again, those breach conditions have been observed, and knowing that these lands will sort of funnel into that facility, we wanted to make sure that this development doesn't compound those conditions, doesn't make things worse, essentially. So the way to do that is to look at the stormwater management conditions for this development and make sure that its facility, which is proposed at the northwest corner of Hanson and Blind Line, be designed to accommodate additional quantity controls. So those are the comments that we had relayed to the applicant and asked them to include in their preliminary design for that facility additional measures to provide further control, so we would not be exacerbating existing conditions downstream.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. Appreciate it.
Okay, Councillor Sherwood and then Councillor Peters.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. Through you to Mr. Ward. Mr. Ward, thank you so much for a very thorough and well-explained, documented report. I'm quite excited to get this thing moving along because it looks like it's been in the books for a long time. However, my little bit of concern here is, should we not be holding another public meeting, since by your report, the last public meeting was in September of 2014. So, you know, almost 7 years ago, or at least a good 6. And there could likely be new residents that have moved into the circulation area that might not even be aware of that. Do we have anything that obligates us to have another public meeting without going forward? Has this aged out, is what I'm wondering.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Sherwood. We certainly did give consideration to the need or appropriateness to hold an additional public meeting prior to consideration of a decision on these applications, given the age of the development. However, the Planning Act is very clear. It requires a public meeting to be held. That's been more than fulfilled. There's been 2 public meetings held historically. With that said, I would note that the subdivision concept has been very stable throughout the evolution of the application, so there certainly haven't been any substantive changes with the subdivision since the previous public meetings were held. A lot of the progress or the ongoing review has been more of a technical nature to satisfy agency and town division comments. And if the public meetings that were held for very similar developments adjacent to these lands back in November was any indication of the community interest in this, we heard the comments received at that meeting and noted they were very similar to the comments echoed more previously with the public meetings held initially for this application. So we feel that the report documents very thoroughly the comments received and how they've been responded to through the submission process. And given that the subdivision design has been relatively stable, we felt it would be appropriate to move forward for a decision at this time.
Can I have just one quick follow-up, Your Worship, to Mr. Ward? So at present, is there signage out there right now for this particular development? You know how you normally put a sign out on the sites to give the public in the area a notification of that? Is there something specific on that location? So that if new members had moved into that area, they could contact the planning department and get clarification as to what exactly that development is, and that would make it so that we won't necessarily have to have another public meeting.
Sure.
Again, through you, Your Worship, there are signs posted on the site. There's one in particular, I believe, on Hanson, at the terminus of Hanson, or in that general area, as well as the terminus of Meyer Drive. So there are signs existing and they've been maintained all along.
Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to take a moment to commend the planning department for a very comprehensive list of approval conditions. And specifically, some ones we've been hammering at on the last several development proposals with respect to the energy and water performance of the development. So just wanted to thank Mr. Ward and his team for that list and, keeping developers on their toes in terms of, what sort of product they're bringing to Orangeville and what our long-term outlook is for the town.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Peters. Councillors, any further comments from anyone at this point? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to receive this and to approve the draft plan of subdivision. All in favor?
Yes.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, 12.3, just a comment from the clerk. Madam Clerk. So we've moved the meeting from the 22nd to tonight, as you all know. That's all we can say about that. You need to have a motion? Okay. We have just a motion to approve that. Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Moving on to 13, we've got correspondence. We have from the auditors. Again, that name was spoken to earlier tonight, and Mr. Osmond is going to do some work on reduction of fees again because of the pandemic. We have 13.2, the group CrimeNot, which is supporting those who've been victims of human trafficking, and that group has just started. I know the local Rotary Club is behind this group, and I want to thank them for putting this on our agenda and asking for a proclamation on February 22nd, which we will be doing. And then the Provis Club as well is also asking for a proclamation, and I think it's the first time that they've come to us, so we're happy to cooperate with that. Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to echo a comment that you made about 13.2 CrimeNot. I was honored from the organization to participate as the narrator for their visual public service announcement, and really an impactful organization. And I commend not only Mr. Burnside, but Mr. Elliott, Ms. Frater, as well as Mr. Kerr, and also Mr. Michael Wright, who are part of much of this in our community. So I do suggest to members of council, if you get an opportunity to review the website and review the visual and other information, it really will provide you with a lot of education.
Very good. Thank you. So can we have a motion to receive this correspondence, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any further comment from councillors? All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I just clarify, because they are in proclamations, that you're approving them along with the receipt, so council knows.
Right. So Councillor, Madam Clerk is just reminding me that we are approving the proclamations as well as noting them, and we're going to add that into this motion. If that's okay with council. All right, we have item 14. We have minutes of the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee. That is from January 5th, 2021. May I have a motion to receive those minutes, please? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any comment from councillors on these minutes? Oh, if we have a motion, let's vote on receiving them, please. Okay, that was unanimous. All right, now we're going on to a notice of motion prior to meeting. This is from Councillor Sherwood, and it's a request. Well, I'll let you speak to it, Councillor Sherwood. Go right ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. What I'm doing is supporting our fellow municipalities, the City of Port Colborne and the City of Hamilton, who's requested that we lobby to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario when they are considering the applications of cannabis retail stores, that they consider a radial separation of retail stores as part of the application process. So currently they do not have that, where you could, so basically we could just have cannabis store beside cannabis store continually. And what I'm asking in this motion is to support our other two communities and let the Ministry of Attorney General, the Premier of Ontario, and our MPP, Honourable Sylvia Jones, to take into consideration that they look after, make sure that cannabis locations are not within close proximity of each other.
Just out of curiosity, was there a measurement of this radial separation? Was there a distance that has been recommended in the other municipalities?
Your Worship, when I looked over our information item, they did not, neither one recommended a specific area. So I would think that they were looking at the province to probably look into that and make that decision.
Very good. Okay, so Councillor Sherwood is making this motion. Do we have a seconder for this? Councillor Taylor. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Peters, then Councillor Taylor. Peters, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I looked into this a little bit after Councillor Sherwood brought it up previously, and I'm not sure I'm aligned with the logic. You know, the province regulates how far a store can be from a school, and I understand that. But in terms of proximity to each other or other establishments, I don't really see the benefit. I don't really see the rationale behind it. We have other establishments lined up all in a row, bars, convenience stores that sell cigarettes, for example. You know, is the rationale that there will be a certain clientele that congregate and that's bad for the neighborhood or something? Because that doesn't fit right with me. You know, the market should take care, the marketplace should take care of where things end up and how customers are distributed. And, you know, we want businesses downtown that invite walk-ups and foot traffic. So I really don't see the benefit of a motion of this nature.
Very good. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I had an embarrassing phone call with Councillor Sherwood last night, but the language in it is quite different. You know, with the way it's worded. But I grasped it after I got my mentoring from my friend on what she was trying to say. I guess to me, it's an odd thing for us to do. I certainly will support it, Councillor Sherwood. I think it's a noble thing to do. But the reality is the province is going to dictate where they want them to go, and I don't know that we're going to change that. But I'm certainly happy to support your motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow up, perhaps to Councillor Peters, being sitting on the Orangeville BIA, it was quite concerning to them, and basically it could be just the influx of shoppers that might congregate in close proximity to each other. So it was the wish of them more than anything that we kind of not have our downtown filled with cannabis stores, and I thought that should actually go community-wide.
Right. I just like to say I'm after listening to Councillor Peters, I'm thinking that, you know, market forces are really what control these kind of things in the end. And, you know, he did mention about bars, and I think we all know the danger of alcohol, and it certainly seems to be causing more problems in society than cannabis now that we're a couple of years into legalization of cannabis. So, yeah, it's an interesting topic, but, you know, red tape and further red tape is not something I'm a big fan of, but I might be more aligned to Councillor Peters on this one. Councillor Taylor and Councillor Post, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say, I don't know why we feel we need to justify these things, but I feel like I need to. I have not been in one. It's not something it's not something desirable to me, and not that that's pertinent to the story, but I think it shows my ignorance to most of it. But when I'm out walking each night, there's a brand new facility on Broadway, on the north side of Broadway. It is lined up. It is one of the busiest establishments going. From what I understand, it's clean inside, and the people that run that, whom I have not met, are very friendly and good business managers at this point. So that is what I hear, and if that's what we're going to have, and it's a legal entity, then I think we should support them. But the fact is, to have a whole bunch of them around, I'm not sure we need it. So again, I'll support Councillor Sherwood.
Very good. Any further comments from councillors before we vote on this? Councillor Post, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm kind of aligned to what Councillor Peters is saying here as well, and I do have a question about the comment about this is kind of what the BIA wants. Now, I understand when Roger Brooks came, they made suggestion to the BIA at that time that the BIA look at how they do their businesses. Are they going to grandfather in businesses that are there and perhaps in the future prohibit services or accountants or something like that from utilizing the downtown space? Now, by limiting retailers like cannabis retailers, are they looking to move forward with that type of approach, the Roger Brooks approach, or is this just a one-off that this is one type of business that they don't want down there? I'm just a bit confused about the ask as well.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's a better question for the BIA. I don't want to put you on the spot, Councillor Sherwood. I'm happy to ask those questions of the BIA if that's better for you, but just curious.
We actually have a BIA meeting tomorrow morning, which I could ask them to get more specific answers. They were just mentioning that at the time they had heard there was like 6 to 8 applications, and that more than 90% of the applications were going to be located in the downtown area. So I don't think that they're worried so much as to how many cannabis locations are in the community. It's just in the proximity. That's the whole wish of this, is just that we could have 8, we could have 10. Yes, it's legal, but we want it spread out, and we certainly don't want, like I say, one door after another all along Broadway, maybe between 2nd Street and 1st Street being 8. We don't want those 8 cannabis locations just being in that proximity, but they're welcome anywhere else throughout town. And that's why this is just specific to saying proximity.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, I certainly can see Councillor Peters' point. We should butt out of these people's business and let as many come as we want. But I do find it interesting that our liquor store, I believe we have a bylaw in town that there's only 1 liquor store allowed on Broadway. Someone can correct me if that's not right, but that's what I understood. There was a bylaw for that. So it's a similar sort of thing to this. You know.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is for town council to support other municipalities, and as per Councillor Sherwood's request here, to lobby the province to come up with additional restrictions on location. And we have a seconder. I'm sorry, Councillor Taylor. Is there a seconder on that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So all in favor? And opposed? We got Peters, Post, and Brown as opposed. Okay, folks, that's great. Now moving on to 16, any notices of motion and meeting? Councillor Post.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I want to bring some wording together for our next meeting. We all received some correspondence from Mr. Thompson over the course of the weekend, where he was going in and looking for a renewal of his annual burn permit. He had spoken at that time to timing of the bylaw, which right now the wording is between 6 and 11. His ask was perhaps through COVID times, with so many families spending extra time outdoors on their own property, if town council would be willing to look at extending that perhaps a little bit earlier in the day to 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock, something like that. And I'm happy to work with town staff on what would be most appropriate for that. But I'd like to put forward a notice right now for the next meeting that I would like to bring that forward.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Post. Any other councillors wish to take a notice of motion meeting? Seeing none, any new business, councillors? Councillor Sherwood, your hand up.
Yes, Your Worship, just to go back to our conversation with the red rink, I definitely would like to go forward with what Mr. Brennan had suggested, that we look at getting the red rink ice removed as in order to have the facility available for when we have the green light from the health department to start vaccinating our community. So does that have to be a motion right now, Mr. Brennan?
Mr. Brennan, maybe your wording was a little different. I think it was just to give staff direction to cooperate with public health to come up with the right timing to convert the rink into an inoculation center.
Yes, Your Worship, I think the most important point here is that council is aware. Just a couple more details as so that the public also understands. Where public health is hoping to have the arena ready for mid-March. Again, the start dates of the mass vaccination will depend on delivery of vaccines, of course. They're hoping that by mid-summer that they've got a lot of this vaccination done. But again, it's all dependent on the delivery of vaccines. So we could have that arena, red rink at Alder Street Rec Center, set up for a vaccination site until August, September. So understanding that, we will also keep track of our costs, of any costs in supporting this operation. Though the government, from what I've been told, the provincial government has said that they will not reimburse municipalities directly. They may reimburse some of our costs or all of it, portion of it, through our public health units. So we will work with them in the support. There will be some costs in the setup of fiber, electric, or I shouldn't say fiber, but data drops, electrical. The municipalities have normally been setting up or lending out some laptop computers to the mass vaccinators and public health, printers, things of that nature. I want to assure council that we would work very closely with our counterparts at the county. I've spoken with the CAO, Ms. Pritchard, and this will be a joint venture in support of all parties working together. So really a motion from council supporting the setup of the vaccination center, and maybe directing myself to work with our counterparts at the county and public health to ensure a smooth operations and support of their vaccination center would be wonderful at this point.
Okay.
That's exactly what I said, what he said.
What he said. What he said. Okay, now looked like Deputy Mayor McIntosh was going to second that. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Did you wish to speak to this as well or not?
No.
Anybody wish to make a comment at this point? Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any other new business, councillors? Seeing none, we're at question period right now. Madam Clerk?
Nobody.
We have no questions. So moving on to 19, we've got a couple of bylaws to listed below, which should be read 3 times and finally passed. That is the zoning bylaw 2290, and also a bylaw that confirmed the proceedings of the council of the Corporation of Town of Orangeville at a special meeting on February the 17th, 2021. They have a motion to approve these bylaws, please. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Any further comment? No. All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. And a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Taylor, second by Councillor Post. All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Take care.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye now.
Hey, Karen,
Oh, yes.
I noticed there's no second on that number